Baby found a German Shepherd inside a mailbox. What happened next? Left. Everyone crying. What happened next will shock you and leave you speechless. Before we begin, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The story you're about to listen to will change how you see the world around you. Rain drummed against the windows of the small house on Willow Street, like tiny fists demanding attention. 6-year-old Maya Chen pressed her face against the cold glass, watching water streak down in zigzag patterns. Her breath fogged the window as she traced invisible letters with her finger. The morning felt different somehow, heavy with something she couldn't name. "Maya, come eat your cereal before it gets soggy," her mother called from the kitchen. The smell of coffee mixed with the sound of her father shuffling papers at the breakfast table. Everything seemed normal, routine, safe. But Maya's stomach twisted with an odd feeling, like when she knew a thunderstorm was coming before anyone else noticed the clouds. She slipped on her bright yellow rain boots and grabbed her small umbrella. "I'm going to check the mailbox. Invar," she announced, already reaching for the door handle. Her parents barely looked up. Maya always loved playing mailman, pretending to deliver important letters to their neighbors. It was her favorite game, especially on rainy days when the world felt mysterious and full of secrets. The gravel crunched under her boots as she skipped toward the old metal mailbox at the end of their driveway. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and everything smelled fresh and clean. She hummed a tune she'd heard on the radio, swinging her umbrella like a dancing partner. The mailbox stood crooked on its post, painted blue but now chipped and faded from years of weather. As she got closer, Maya heard something that made her freeze mid-step. A soft scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. Then a whimper so quiet she almost missed it. Her heart began to race. The sound was coming from inside the mailbox. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for the metal door. The scratching grew louder, more desperate. She pulled the door open slowly, expecting to find a trapped bird, or maybe a squirrel. Instead, she screamed. Crammed inside the narrow space was a German Shepherd puppy, barely alive. His fur was matted with mud and blood, his eyes barely open. One of his legs was twisted at an odd angle, and rope marks circled his tiny paws. He was so thin Maya could see his ribs through his soaked fur. The puppy looked up at her, with eyes that seemed too old for his young face, as if he'd seen terrible things no animal should ever witness. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. She dropped her umbrella and reached toward the puppy with shaking hands. He didn't growl or snap. Instead, he let out the smallest whimper, as if he was trying to say thank you. Maya's tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks as she carefully lifted the puppy from the mailbox. He was so light, like holding a bag of feathers. The puppy's breathing was shallow and rapid. Maya could feel his heart beating against her chest like a tiny drum. She ran toward the house, her boots splashing through puddles, her voice cracking as she screamed for help. "Mom! Dad! Help me! Please help me!" She burst through the front door, water dripping everywhere, holding the injured puppy like he was made of glass. Her parents looked up from their morning routine, coffee cups frozen halfway to their lips. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only sound was the puppy's labored breathing and Maya's sobbing. "I found him in the mailbox," Maya gasped between tears. "He's hurt really bad. We have to help him. Please, we have to help him." Her father, David, was the first to recover from the shock. He jumped up from his chair, his newspaper falling to the floor. "What? Maya, what are you talking about? There's nothing in the mailbox except—" He stopped talking when he saw the puppy. His face went pale. "Oh my God," her mother Sarah whispered. She rushed over, her nursing instincts kicking in. She examined the puppy quickly, her hands gentle but efficient. "David, get the car. We need to get him to Dr. Martinez right now. This little guy is in serious trouble." The drive to the veterinary clinic felt like the longest 20 minutes of Maya's life. She sat in the back seat, holding the puppy wrapped in her favorite blanket. She whispered to him the whole way, telling him everything would be okay, that they were going to take care of him. The puppy's eyes never left her face, as if he understood every word. Dr. Martinez was waiting when they arrived. His assistant Jenny had called ahead to prepare the emergency room. The old veterinarian had seen many injured animals in his 30 years of practice, but even he looked shocked when he saw the puppy's condition. "This is severe neglect," he said quietly to Maya's parents while examining the puppy. "Whoever did this wanted him to suffer. The rope marks suggest he was tied up for days, maybe weeks. He's dehydrated, malnourished, and has a broken leg. But he's young and strong. We can save him. Maya refused to leave the puppy's side during the examination. She held his tiny paw while Dr. Martinez cleaned his wounds and set his broken leg. The puppy never took his eyes off her face, as if she was his anchor in a world full of pain. "What kind of person would do this to a baby?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. She kept running her fingers through Maya's hair, as if she needed to touch her daughter to make sure she was real and safe. "I don't know," Dr. Martinez replied, his jaw tight with anger, "but I'm required to report this to animal control. This is clearly a case of animal cruelty. Someone needs to be held accountable." Hours passed before Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the treatment room with good news. The puppy was stable, his leg was set, and he was responding well to fluids and medication. Maya could see him, but he needed to stay overnight for observation. "Can we visit him tomorrow?" Maya asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Of course, sweetheart. In fact, I think he'd like that very much. He seems to have bonded with you already." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the puppy's eyes, so full of pain but also hope. She drew pictures of him in her sketchbook, trying to imagine him healthy and happy. She drew him running through fields, playing with balls, sleeping in a warm bed. In every picture, she was there beside him. The next morning, Animal Control Officer Rebecca Torres arrived at their house. She was a kind woman with gentle eyes, but her expression was serious as she took Maya's statement about finding the puppy. "This is very unusual," Officer Torres said, making notes in her file. "We've had several reports of animal cruelty in the past month, but nothing like this. Putting a puppy in a mailbox it's beyond cruel. It's psychotic." Maya's parents exchanged worried glances. "You think someone is targeting animals in our neighborhood?" David asked. "I'm not sure yet, but we're going to find out. In the meantime, have you thought about what you want to do with the puppy? He's going to need a lot of care and attention." Maya looked up at her parents with pleading eyes. She didn't need to say anything. They already knew what she was thinking. "We'll take care of him," Sarah said firmly. "Maya found him. She saved him. He belongs with us now." Officer Torres smiled for the first time since arriving. "I was hoping you'd say that. Dr. Martinez thinks he'll make a full recovery, but he'll need physical therapy for his leg. Are you prepared for that?" "Whatever he needs," Maya said with determination far beyond her 6 years. "I'm going to take care of him forever." When they visited the puppy that afternoon, he was already looking better. His eyes were brighter, and he lifted his head when he saw Maya. She sat beside his cage and talked to him for an hour, telling him about her room, her toys, and all the adventures they would have together. "What are you going to name him?" Dr. Martinez asked. Maya thought for a moment, studying the puppy's face. "Scout," she said finally, "because he's brave like a scout, and he found his way to me." The puppy's tail wagged weakly, as if he approved of his new name. Maya reached through the cage bars and gently stroked his head. For the first time since she had found him, Scout's eyes closed peacefully. He was safe now. He was home. But as Maya watched Scout sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The way he'd looked at her in the mailbox, the way he seemed to understand everything she said, the way he'd survived when he should have died, it all felt connected to something bigger, something she couldn't quite understand yet. That night, as rain began to fall again, Maya lay in bed thinking about Scout. She wondered who had hurt him, why they'd put him in their mailbox specifically, and what it all meant. She didn't know that finding Scout was just the beginning of a mystery that would change everything she thought she knew about the world around her. Outside her window, the wind howled through the trees, and Maya could swear she heard something else in the sound, a voice calling out across the darkness, searching for something lost. She pulled her blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Tomorrow, Scout would come home with them. Tomorrow, their real adventure would begin. 2 weeks later, Maya thought the hardest part was over. Scout had settled into their home with surprising ease, his broken leg healing faster than Dr. Martinez had expected. The puppy followed Maya everywhere, his limp barely noticeable as he trotted beside her through the house. But Maya was wrong about the hardest part being over. The real mystery was just beginning. The trouble started when Officer Torres called, with news that made Maya's stomach drop. We posted Scout's photo on our social media pages, she explained to Maya's parents over the phone. Within an hour, we had over 300 shares and dozens of comments. People are claiming they've seen this exact same dog in towns all over the state. Maya pressed her ear against the kitchen door, listening to her mother's side of the conversation. Scout sat beside her, his head tilted as if he was listening too. Something about the way he watched the door made Maya's skin prickle with unease. "That's impossible," Sarah said into the phone. "Scout is just a puppy. He couldn't have traveled hundreds of miles." "That's what we thought too," Officer Torres replied. "But we're getting reports from Riverside, Pine Valley, Mountain View, and even some coastal towns. People are sending us photos from weeks ago, claiming it's the same dog. The markings are identical. The white patch on his chest, the way his left ear folds, even a small scar above his right eye." Maya looked down at Scout, studying his face. She'd memorized every detail, the way his brown eyes seemed to hold ancient wisdom, the perfect white diamond shape on his chest. The tiny scar she'd assumed came from his abuse. But what if it hadn't? What if there was something else, something bigger happening here? "We need to investigate this further," Officer Torres continued. "I'm going to start making calls to these other towns. If there's some kind of puppy mill or trafficking ring operating across state lines, we need to shut it down." That night, Maya couldn't concentrate on her homework. She kept staring at Scout, who was curled up on her bed, sleeping peacefully. But even in his sleep, his ears twitched constantly, as if he was listening for something only he could hear. "Mom," Maya called out, "can you come here for a minute?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face tired from a long day at work. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Scout keeps moving his ears when he sleeps, and sometimes he whimpers, but not like he's hurt, like he's trying to talk to someone." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and watched Scout for a few minutes. Sure enough, his ears kept moving, his paws twitching as if he was running in his dreams. "Dogs dream just like we do," she said softly. "He's probably dreaming about playing or running." But Maya knew it was more than that. She'd been watching Scout carefully for 2 weeks, and his behavior was getting stranger, not better. During the day, he was the perfect puppy, playful, affectionate, curious about everything. But at night, he became something else. He would stare at the front door for hours, whimpering softly. He would scratch at Maya's bedroom window, looking out at the street as if he was waiting for someone. The next morning brought another call from Officer Torres, and this time her voice was shaking. "You need to sit down for this," she told Maya's parents. "I've been calling the towns where people reported seeing Scout. Every single one of them had a missing person case in the past month." Maya's father nearly dropped his coffee cup. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in every town where someone reported seeing this dog, an elderly person went missing around the same time. Riverside, an old man named Henry Walsh disappeared while walking his dog. Pine Valley, a retired teacher named Margaret Cole vanished during a storm. Mountain View, a former police officer named Frank Rodriguez went missing from his cabin." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Scout's tail tapping against the floor. Maya looked down at him, and for just a moment, she could swear she saw something in his eyes that didn't belong to a puppy, something old and sad and knowing. "What happened to their dogs?" Sarah asked quietly. "That's the thing," Officer Torres said. "In every case, the dogs were found days later, healthy and unharmed, but acting strangely. They would howl at night, refuse to eat, and scratch at doors and windows. Then, after a few days, they would disappear again. No one could explain it." Maya's hands started to shake. She reached down to pet Scout, and he looked up at her with those ancient eyes. For the first time since she'd found him, she felt afraid. That night, Maya pretended to be asleep when Scout began his nightly ritual. She watched through barely open eyes as he padded to her bedroom door and sat down, staring at it intently. His ears were pricked forward, and his body was tense, as if he was listening to something she couldn't hear. Then, something impossible happened. Scout stood up and walked to Maya's window. He placed his front paws on the sill and looked out at the street, his tail wagging slowly. Maya followed his gaze and gasped. There, standing under the streetlight, was the shadowy figure of a man in what looked like a uniform. Maya rubbed her eyes, thinking she was dreaming. But when she looked again, the figure was still there. The man seemed to be looking directly at her window, and even from this distance she could see that he was gesturing for Scout to come outside. Scout whimpered softly and scratched at the window. Maya's heart was racing so fast she thought it might explode. She wanted to wake up her parents, but something held her back. The figure under the streetlight didn't seem threatening. He seemed sad, desperate, like he was trying to tell her something important. Maya quietly got out of bed and tiptoed to the window. The man was clearer now, and she could see he was wearing some kind of official uniform with patches on the sleeves. He was older, with gray hair and kind eyes, but his face was pale and translucent, like he was made of moonlight and shadow. "Who are you?" Maya whispered to the glass. The man's mouth moved, but no sound came through the window. He pointed to Scout, then to himself, then made a sweeping gesture toward the east. Scout's whimpering grew louder, and he began scratching at the window more frantically. Maya's hands were shaking as she quietly unlocked the window and pushed it open just a crack. The night air was cold and carried the scent of rain and something else, something that smelled like the ocean, even though they lived hundreds of miles from the coast. "Please," the man's voice was barely a whisper, but somehow Maya heard it clearly. "Help him remember. Help him find his way home." "Remember what?" Maya whispered back. But the man was already fading. Within seconds, he was gone, leaving only the empty street and the sound of Scout's desperate whimpering. Maya closed the window and looked down at Scout. His eyes were bright with tears. Actual tears, something she'd never seen from a dog before. She knelt down beside him and stroked his head gently. "What do you need to remember?" she asked softly. Scout looked up at her, and somehow Maya knew he understood every word. More than that, she knew he was trying to tell her something important, something that could help solve the mystery of the missing people and the strange sightings. The next few days passed in a blur of strange occurrences. Scout began acting even more unusual. He would stand in the middle of rooms and tilt his head as if listening to voices Maya couldn't hear. He would walk to specific spots in the house and paw at the ground, whimpering softly. Most disturbing of all, he began drawing in the dirt outside. Maya discovered this by accident when she found Scout in the backyard, using his paw to scratch shapes in the soft earth. At first, she thought he was just playing, but when she looked closer, she realized he was drawing recognizable shapes, circles, lines, and what looked like waves. "Mom, you need to see this," Maya called out. Sarah came outside and stared at the marks in the dirt. "Dogs don't draw," she said slowly. "This is impossible." But the evidence was right there in front of them. Scout had drawn what looked like a map, circles connected by lines, with wavy lines that could represent water. In the center of the drawing was a tall, thin shape that looked remarkably like a lighthouse. "Maya," Sarah said quietly, "has Scout ever been to the ocean?" "Not with us," Maya replied. "But maybe he remembers something from before." That night, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She waited until her parents were asleep, then quietly gathered Scout's leash and a flashlight. She wasn't sure what she was planning to do, but she knew Scout needed to show her something important. She clipped the leash to Scout's collar and whispered, "Okay, boy, show me what you're trying to tell me." Scout immediately headed for the front door, his tail wagging for the first time in days. Maya carefully unlocked the door and stepped outside into the cool night air. Scout didn't hesitate. He began walking east, just as the mysterious man had gestured. They walked through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, past houses where normal families were sleeping peacefully, unaware that a little girl and her extraordinary dog were embarking on a journey that would uncover secrets no one was prepared for. Scout seemed to know exactly where he was going. He led Maya through residential streets, past the local park, and toward the old industrial part of town that had been abandoned for years. Maya's heart was pounding, but she trusted Scout completely. Whatever he was trying to show her, she knew it was important. They stopped in front of an old building that Maya had never paid attention to before. It was a former post office, its windows boarded up and its sign so faded she could barely read it. Scout sat down in front of the building and began to howl, a sound so mournful and desperate that it made Maya's eyes fill with tears. "What is it, Scout?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. Scout stopped howling and looked up at her with those ancient eyes. Then he did something that made Maya's blood run cold. He placed his paw on her hand and began to whimper, and suddenly Maya could see images in her mind that weren't her own. She saw flashes of a lighthouse on a rocky coast, waves crashing against jagged rocks, an old man in a Coast Guard uniform calling out a dog's name. She saw storm clouds gathering, rain lashing against windows, and a desperate search along a dangerous shoreline. Most clearly of all, she saw the man from her window, younger and alive, holding a German Shepherd puppy and promising to always keep him safe. Maya gasped and pulled her hand back. Scout was still staring at her, his eyes filled with sadness and hope. "You're not just any dog," she whispered. "You're trying to tell me about someone who's missing, aren't you?" Scout's tail wagged once, and Maya knew she was right. But she also knew that what she'd just experienced was impossible. Dogs didn't share memories with humans. Ghosts didn't appear under streetlights, and 6-year-old girls didn't solve mysteries that baffled adults. But impossible or not, Maya knew that Scout was connected to something much bigger than animal cruelty. The missing people, the strange sightings, the ghostly figure under the streetlight, it was all connected. And somehow, Scout was the key to solving it all. As they walked home through the quiet streets, Maya's mind raced with questions. Who was the man in the uniform? What did the lighthouse have to do with anything? And most importantly, how was she going to convince anyone that her dog was somehow connected to a mystery that spanned multiple states and involved missing people she'd never heard of? One thing was certain. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would have to find a way to help Scout remember who he really was and what he needed to do. Because Maya was beginning to suspect that Scout wasn't just a lost puppy who had been abused. He was something much more extraordinary, and he needed her help to complete a mission that was literally a matter of life and death. What do you think Scout is really trying to tell Maya? Drop your theories in the comments below. The next morning, Maya woke up feeling like she'd lived through a dream that was too real to be imagination. Scout was curled up beside her bed, but something was different about him. His eyes held a clarity that hadn't been there before, as if their midnight journey had awakened something deep inside him. Maya knew she had to tell her parents what had happened, but she also knew they would never believe her. At breakfast, Maya pushed her cereal around the bowl, trying to find the right words. Her parents were discussing work schedules and weekend plans, completely unaware that their daughter had just experienced something that would change their lives forever. "Mom, Dad," Maya said quietly, "I need to tell you something about Scout." David looked up from his newspaper. "What about him, sweetheart? Is he feeling okay?" Maya took a deep breath. "Last night, Scout and I went for a walk. We found an old post office, and Scout, he showed me things. In my mind, like memories that weren't mine." Sarah and David exchanged concerned glances. "Maya," Sarah said gently, "you were supposed to stay in your room last night. You know you're not allowed to leave the house after bedtime." "I know, but Scout needed to show me something important. There's a man who's looking for him. A man in a uniform. I think he's from the Coast Guard." "Honey," David said, setting down his newspaper, "I think you might have had a very vivid dream. Sometimes when we're worried about something, our dreams can feel very real." Maya felt tears of frustration building in her eyes. "It wasn't a dream. Scout drew a map in the dirt yesterday. He drew a lighthouse. And last night, he led me to that old post office because he's trying to tell us something about missing people." Before her parents could respond, Scout suddenly jumped up from his spot by Maya's feet and ran to the front window. He began barking frantically, pawing at the glass. Maya rushed to see what had caught his attention, and her heart nearly stopped. A police car was pulling into their driveway, and Officer Torres was getting out, her face grim. Behind her was another car with 2 people Maya didn't recognize, a middle-aged woman with red hair and a man in a Coast Guard uniform. "Who are those people?" Sarah asked, watching from the window. They didn't have to wait long to find out. Officer Torres knocked on the door, and when David opened it, she stepped inside with the 2 strangers. "I'm sorry to bother you so early," Officer Torres said, "but we have some developments in Scout's case that you need to know about. This is Detective Maria Santos from the State Police, and this is Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell from the Coast Guard." Maya's eyes went wide when she heard Coast Guard. She looked down at Scout, who had stopped barking but was staring intently at Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, his tail wagging slowly. Detective Santos spoke first. "We've been investigating the reports about Scout being seen in multiple locations. What we've discovered is deeply troubling. In every town where Scout was reportedly sighted, we've had missing person cases involving elderly individuals with strong connections to military or emergency services." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell stepped forward, his eyes kind but serious. 3 weeks ago, we lost one of our own. Retired Chief Petty Officer Benjamin Hayes disappeared during a storm while conducting a welfare check on an elderly lighthouse keeper named Thomas Garrett. Ben's body was recovered 2 days later, but his dog, Rex, was never found. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "Rex," she whispered, looking down at Scout. "Not Scout. Rex." The adults all turned to stare at her. "What did you say?" Lieutenant Commander Mitchell asked. "His name isn't Scout," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "His real name is Rex, and he belongs to Benjamin Hayes. I saw him last night. Ben, I mean. He was standing under our streetlight, trying to tell me something." The room fell completely silent. Maya's parents looked mortified, but Detective Santos was studying Maya with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Tell me about this man you saw," Detective Santos said, pulling out a notepad. Maya described everything: the uniform, the gray hair, the way the man had pointed east and asked her to help Rex remember. She told them about the memories Rex had shared with her, about the lighthouse and the stormy night. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's face had gone pale. "Can you describe his uniform in more detail?" Maya closed her eyes and concentrated. It had patches on the sleeves. One looked like an anchor with wings, and there was a name tag, but I couldn't read it clearly. The letters started with H.A. "Hayes," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell whispered. "Benjamin Hayes." He pulled out his phone and showed Maya a photo. "Is this the man you saw?" Maya's heart skipped a beat. It was him. The same kind eyes, the same gray hair, the same sad expression. Yes, that's him. But he looked different, like he was made of shadows and moonlight. Detective Santos and Officer Torres exchanged meaningful glances. "Maya," Detective Santos said carefully, "Benjamin Hayes died 3 weeks ago. His body was recovered from the ocean near Beacon Point Lighthouse." "I know," Maya said simply. "That's why he needs our help. He can't rest until Rex finds his way home." The adults stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just heard. Finally, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell spoke. "There's something else you should know. Benjamin wasn't just checking on the lighthouse keeper that night. Thomas Garrett had called our emergency line, claiming he was being threatened by someone who wanted to buy his lighthouse property. Ben went to investigate, but the storm hit harder than expected." "What happened to Thomas Garrett?" Sarah asked. "He's missing too," Detective Santos replied. "We found signs of a struggle at the lighthouse, but no body. The case is still active." Rex suddenly stood up and walked over to Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. He sat down directly in front of the officer and placed his paw on the man's boot. Then he looked up at Maya with those ancient, knowing eyes. "He wants to go home," Maya said softly. "He wants to go to the lighthouse." Detective Santos shook her head. "That's not possible. Beacon Point is a crime scene. It's been sealed off for weeks." "But Rex knows something," Maya insisted. "He's been trying to tell me about that night, about what happened to Thomas Garrett. If we take him there, he can show us." The adults began discussing the logistics, the dangers, the protocols that would need to be followed. But Maya wasn't listening. She was watching Rex, who had moved to the window and was staring east toward the coast, his body tense with anticipation. That night, Maya couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Rex had been restless all day, pacing and whimpering, clearly agitated by the visit from the Coast Guard officer. Maya's parents had spoken in hushed voices after the officials left, and she could tell they were struggling to understand how their daughter had known details about a dead man she'd never met. Maya was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when Rex suddenly jumped up and ran to her bedroom door. He scratched at it urgently, whimpering in a way that sounded almost like crying. Maya got up and opened the door. Rex immediately ran toward the front of the house, and Maya followed. When she caught up with him, he was standing at the front door, his ears perked forward, listening to something she couldn't hear. Then Maya heard it too, a car engine outside, running but not moving. She peeked through the window and saw a dark sedan parked across the street, its headlights off but its engine running. The driver was just a shadow, but Maya could see he was watching their house. Rex began growling low in his throat, a sound Maya had never heard from him before. It was the growl of a dog who had seen danger and was preparing to protect his family. Maya's heart started racing. She thought about waking her parents, but something held her back. Instead, she knelt down beside Rex and whispered, "What is it, boy? Who's out there?" Rex looked up at her, and suddenly Maya was seeing through his eyes again. She saw flashes of that terrible night 3 weeks ago, a lighthouse beam cutting through storm clouds, an old man shouting over the wind, someone in dark clothes approaching the lighthouse keeper's cottage. She saw Benjamin Hayes arriving in his Coast Guard vehicle, saw him getting out in the rain, saw him walking toward the lighthouse. Then she saw something that made her gasp. The person in dark clothes wasn't a stranger. It was someone Thomas Garrett knew, someone he trusted enough to let into his home, someone who had been pressuring him to sell the lighthouse property for months. The vision ended abruptly, and Maya found herself back in her living room, staring at Rex with wide eyes. The car across the street was gone, but Maya knew it would be back. Whoever had killed Benjamin Hayes and taken Thomas Garrett knew that Rex had witnessed everything, and now they knew that Rex was alive and might be able to identify them. "We're not safe here," Maya whispered to Rex. "They know you remember." Rex whimpered and pressed against Maya's legs, seeking comfort. Maya stroked his head gently, trying to think. She couldn't wake her parents. They would never believe her about the visions or the danger, but she also couldn't just wait for something terrible to happen. Maya made a decision that scared and excited her at the same time. She was going to help Rex get back to the lighthouse, with or without adult permission. She was going to help him find Thomas Garrett and expose whoever was responsible for Benjamin Hayes' death. But first, she needed to convince someone in authority to listen to her, and she knew exactly who that someone was going to be. The next morning, Maya called Detective Santos while her parents were at work, and she was supposed to be at school. She'd convinced her mother she had a stomachache, which wasn't entirely untrue. Her stomach had been churning with anxiety all night. "Detective Santos," Maya said when the woman answered the phone, "this is Maya Chen, the girl with the dog you think is Rex." "Maya? How did you get this number? Shouldn't you be in school?" "Officer Torres gave me your card yesterday. I need to tell you something important. The person who hurt Benjamin Hayes and took Thomas Garrett, they know Rex is alive. They were watching our house last night." There was a long pause. "Maya, that's a very serious accusation. Are you sure about what you saw?" "I'm sure. And I'm also sure that Rex can help you find Thomas Garrett. But we have to go to the lighthouse. He keeps showing me visions of what happened that night, and I think Thomas might still be alive." Detective Santos sighed. "Maya, I understand that you want to help, but this is a police matter. It's too dangerous for a child to be involved." "But Rex won't cooperate with anyone except me," Maya said desperately. "He only shares his memories with me. Without me, you'll never know what really happened." Maya could hear Detective Santos thinking on the other end of the line. Finally, the detective spoke. "If, and I mean if, we were to consider taking you to the lighthouse, it would have to be under very strict conditions. Your parents would have to give permission, you'd have to stay with me at all times, and you'd have to promise to do exactly what I say." "I promise," Maya said immediately, "but we have to go soon. I think whoever took Thomas Garrett is planning something. The way they were watching our house last night, they're getting desperate." "How can you be so sure about all this, Maya? You're just a child." Maya looked down at Rex, who was sitting beside her with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Because Rex isn't just a dog, Detective Santos. I think he's something more, something that connects him to Benjamin Hayes even after death. And I think I'm the only one who can help him finish what Benjamin started." There was another long pause. "I'll call your parents," Detective Santos said finally. "If they agree, and if Lieutenant Commander Mitchell approves, we'll take you to Beacon Point tomorrow. But, Maya, if you're wrong about this, if you're just letting your imagination run wild, there could be serious consequences." "I'm not wrong," Maya said with absolute certainty. "Rex and I are going to solve this case. We're going to find Thomas Garrett and bring Benjamin Hayes' killer to justice." As Maya hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of terror and excitement. Tomorrow, she and Rex would return to the place where it all began. Tomorrow, they would uncover the truth about that stormy night 3 weeks ago. And tomorrow, Maya would discover just how extraordinary her connection with Rex really was. Rex seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. He spent the rest of the day drawing more maps in the backyard dirt, and this time Maya could clearly see what they represented: the coastline, the lighthouse, and something else that made her blood run cold. a small building behind the lighthouse with an X marked over it, and what looked like a figure lying inside. Could Thomas Garrett still be alive after 3 weeks? And if so, how much longer could he survive? Maya had a terrible feeling that time was running out, and tomorrow might be their last chance to save him. What do you think Maya and Rex will discover at the lighthouse? Share your predictions below. The drive to Beacon Point Lighthouse took 3 hours, and Maya felt every minute of it. She sat in the back seat of Detective Santos's unmarked police car, holding Rex close while he trembled with anticipation. Her parents had reluctantly agreed to let her go after Detective Santos explained how crucial Maya's connection with Rex might be to solving the case. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell followed behind them in his own vehicle, along with 2 other Coast Guard officers. Maya watched the landscape change from suburban neighborhoods to rolling hills, and finally to the rugged coastline where gray waves crashed against black rocks. The smell of salt air filled the car, and Rex's trembling intensified. His eyes never left the window, watching as they approached the place where his world had been shattered 3 weeks ago. "Are you nervous?" Detective Santos asked, glancing at Maya in the rearview mirror. "Yes," Maya admitted, "but Rex needs to do this. I can feel how much he wants to go home." As they crested the final hill, Beacon Point Lighthouse came into view, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. The white tower stood tall against the stormy sky, its red roof bright as blood. Below it, a small keeper's cottage hugged the rocky coastline, surrounded by yellow police tape that fluttered in the ocean wind. Rex let out a long, mournful howl that seemed to echo across the water. Maya felt tears spring to her eyes as emotions that weren't her own flooded through her mind. Longing, grief, determination, and something else. Love. Rex loved this place and the people who had lived here. "He remembers," Maya whispered, stroking Rex's head. "He remembers being happy here." Detective Santos parked near the lighthouse, and Lieutenant Commander Mitchell pulled up beside them. As they got out of the cars, Maya was struck by how isolated this place was. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the only sound was the constant crash of waves against the rocks below. "The Coast Guard has maintained a presence here since Benjamin's death," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell explained as they walked toward the cottage. "But we haven't found any additional evidence about what happened to Thomas Garrett." Rex pulled against his leash, eager to explore, but Maya held him back. She could sense that he was struggling with powerful emotions, the joy of being home mixed with the trauma of that terrible night. "Can we go inside the cottage?" Maya asked. Detective Santos hesitated. "It's still an active crime scene. We'd need to be very careful not to disturb anything." "Rex won't disturb anything," Maya said. "He just needs to show us what happened." They entered the cottage through the front door, and immediately Maya felt the temperature drop. Rex began whimpering softly, his ears flat against his head. The cottage was small but cozy, with nautical decorations and photographs of ships covering the walls. Everything looked normal except for one thing. There were signs of a struggle in the main room. A chair was overturned, and there were scuff marks on the wooden floor. Rex walked slowly through the cottage, sniffing at corners and pawing at specific spots. When he reached the kitchen, he sat down and began to howl again, this time in a tone that made Maya's heart break. "This is where it started," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas was making coffee when someone knocked on the door." The adults exchanged glances. "How do you know that?" Detective Santos asked. Maya closed her eyes and placed her hand on Rex's head. Immediately, she was flooded with images from that stormy night. She saw Thomas Garrett, a kind-faced elderly man with white hair, moving around his kitchen in the early evening. She heard the wind howling outside and rain lashing against the windows. "Someone came to the door," Maya continued, her eyes still closed. "Thomas knew them. He let them in willingly. They talked for a while, but then the conversation got heated. The person wanted Thomas to sell the lighthouse property, but Thomas refused." Maya opened her eyes and found everyone staring at her. Rex was hiding under the kitchen table during the argument. He saw everything. "What else did he see?" Lieutenant Commander Mitchell asked urgently. Maya knelt down beside Rex and looked into his eyes. "Show me the rest," she whispered. The images came faster now, more vivid and terrifying. Maya saw the stranger grab Thomas by the arm when he tried to go to the phone. She saw the old man fall and hit his head on the corner of the kitchen counter. She saw blood, too much blood, and Rex's desperate attempt to protect his friend. "The person panicked when Thomas got hurt," Maya said, her voice shaking. They didn't mean to hurt him that badly. But then Benjamin Hayes arrived. Maya saw Benjamin's Coast Guard vehicle pulling up outside, saw him getting out in the rain and walking toward the cottage. Rex had run to the window, barking frantically, trying to warn Benjamin about the danger inside. Benjamin came in through the front door, Maya continued. He saw Thomas on the floor and immediately tried to help him, but the other person attacked Benjamin from behind with something heavy. Maya gasped and pulled her hand away from Rex's head. The vision had been so intense, so real, that she felt like she'd been there herself. They fought, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. Benjamin tried to radio for help, but his radio was damaged in the struggle. The other person was younger, stronger. They pushed Benjamin outside during the storm. "What happened to Thomas?" Detective Santos asked gently. Maya looked around the cottage, trying to understand what Rex was showing her. He wasn't dead. He was unconscious and bleeding, but he wasn't dead. The person couldn't leave him here because Benjamin had already called in his location. So they moved him. Moved him where? Rex suddenly stood up and walked to the back door of the cottage. He scratched at it urgently, whimpering. Maya followed and opened the door, stepping out into the salty wind. Behind the cottage was a small storage building that Maya hadn't noticed before. It was partially hidden by overgrown bushes and looked like it hadn't been used in years. Rex ran straight to it and began pawing at the heavy wooden door. "In there," Maya said with absolute certainty. "Thomas is in there." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell radioed for backup, while Detective Santos approached the storage building. The door was secured with a heavy padlock that looked relatively new compared to the weathered wood around it. "Stand back," Detective Santos ordered, pulling out bolt cutters. The lock snapped it with a sharp crack, and Detective Santos slowly opened the door. The smell that emerged made everyone take a step back. Not the smell of death, but of sickness and confinement. Inside the dark building, curled up on a pile of old blankets, was Thomas Garrett. He was unconscious, terribly thin, and deathly pale, but his chest was rising and falling, with shallow breaths. "He's alive," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell breathed. "After 3 weeks, he's still alive." Maya rushed forward, but Detective Santos caught her arm. "Let the paramedics handle this," she said. "You've done enough." But Rex had no intention of staying back. He squeezed past the adults and ran to Thomas's side, licking the old man's face gently. Thomas's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw Rex, a weak smile crossed his lips. "Rex," Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible. "Good boy. I knew someone would find us." The paramedics arrived within minutes and immediately began working on Thomas. He was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but conscious and coherent. As they prepared to transport him to the hospital, he grabbed Detective Santos's hand. "It was Marcus," he whispered. "Marcus Brennan. He wanted to buy my lighthouse for his development company. When I refused to sell, he came here that night to threaten me, but then Petty Officer Hayes arrived, and everything went wrong." Detective Santos nodded grimly. "We'll get him, Thomas. Don't worry about that." As the ambulance pulled away with Thomas inside, Maya felt a strange sense of completion. She looked down at Rex, who was sitting calmly for the first time since they'd arrived at the lighthouse. His mission was accomplished. He had led them to Thomas and identified Benjamin's killer. But something was still bothering Maya. "Detective Santos," she said, "if Marcus Brennan was the one who hurt Thomas and Benjamin, why did he leave Rex alive? Why didn't he just—" Detective Santos's expression darkened. "Because Rex wasn't here when it happened. Marcus probably thought the dog had run away during the storm. He had no idea Rex witnessed everything and would remember it." "But Rex was here," Maya said, confused. "He saw everything from under the kitchen table." "No," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell said slowly, understanding dawning on his face. "Rex wasn't physically here that night. Benjamin left Rex at home because of the dangerous weather. But somehow, Rex experienced everything that happened to Benjamin. The connection between them was so strong that Rex felt his master's final moments, even from miles away." Maya stared at Rex in amazement. The bond between the dog and his master had been so powerful that it transcended physical distance, even death itself. Rex had carried Benjamin's memories, Benjamin's need for justice, and Benjamin's love for Thomas Garrett. "That's impossible," Detective Santos said. "Dogs don't have telepathic connections with their owners." "Maybe not," Maya said softly, "but love doesn't follow the rules we think it should." As they prepared to leave Beacon Point, Maya noticed Rex walking toward the lighthouse itself. She followed him, curious about what had drawn his attention. At the base of the lighthouse, Rex sat down and looked up at the white tower stretching toward the cloudy sky. "What is it, boy?" Maya asked. Rex looked at her with those ancient, wise eyes, and Maya felt one final vision wash over her. She saw Benjamin Hayes as a young man, newly assigned to Beacon Point Coast Guard Station. She saw him meeting Thomas Garrett for the first time, saw their friendship grow over the years. She saw Benjamin retiring from active duty, but still checking on the elderly lighthouse keeper, still protecting him like family. And then she saw something that made her gasp. Standing at the top of the lighthouse, transparent but smiling, was Benjamin Hayes. He raised his hand in a final salute to Rex, and Maya could hear his voice on the ocean wind. "Good boy, Rex. You brought them home. You can rest now." Rex's tail wagged once, and then he turned and walked back to Maya. When she looked up at the lighthouse again, Benjamin was gone, but Maya felt a sense of peace settle over the entire area. "Is it over?" Maya asked Rex quietly. Rex looked up at her, and, for the first time since she'd found him in the mailbox, his eyes looked like those of a normal, happy dog. The ancient sadness was gone, replaced by contentment and trust. Marcus Brennan was arrested that evening at his luxury hotel in the city. When confronted with Thomas Garrett's testimony and the evidence found at the lighthouse, he confessed to everything. He had never intended to kill anyone. He'd only wanted to scare Thomas into selling. But when Benjamin Hayes arrived and discovered the injured lighthouse keeper, Marcus had panicked and made a series of terrible decisions that cost Benjamin his life. The media called it the Lighthouse Mystery, but Maya knew the real story was about love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. Rex had carried Benjamin's spirit across impossible distances and through death itself, determined to see justice done and his friend Thomas saved. As they drove home that evening, Rex slept peacefully in Maya's lap for the first time since she'd found him. The trembling was gone, the nighttime anxiety was gone, and the desperate searching was over. Rex had completed his mission and could finally rest. But Maya couldn't stop thinking about the implications of what had happened. If love could transcend death, if the bond between souls could reach across impossible distances, what other miracles were possible in a world that science couldn't fully explain? What would you have done if you experienced Rex's visions like Maya did? Tell us in the comments. 6 months later, Maya's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. The story of how a 6-year-old girl and her extraordinary dog had solved a murder case and saved a man's life had spread across the country. News stations, magazines, and social media platforms had shared their story millions of times. But Maya didn't care about the fame. What mattered to her was that Rex was finally at peace. The transformation in Rex had been remarkable. The anxious, traumatized puppy who used to pace and whimper at night had become a happy, playful dog who loved nothing more than chasing tennis balls in their backyard and sleeping at the foot of Maya's bed. His leg had healed completely, and Dr. Martinez said he'd never seen such a rapid recovery. "It's like he's a completely different dog," Dr. Martinez had told Maya's parents during Rex's final checkup. "The trauma that was holding him back is gone. Whatever you did for him, it worked." Maya knew exactly what had worked. Love, understanding, and giving Rex the chance to complete his mission had freed him from the burden of Benjamin Hayes' unfinished business. Rex was no longer carrying the weight of another soul's pain. He was just Rex now, Maya's dog, her best friend, and her constant companion. The town of Willow Ridge had embraced Maya and Rex as local heroes. The mayor had given them a key to the city, and the local newspaper had done a feature story about their incredible journey. But Maya noticed that people sometimes looked at her differently now, with a mixture of admiration and unease. They called her the girl who talks to spirits, and the child who sees things others can't. Maya didn't mind the attention, but she did mind the way some adults now spoke to her carefully, as if they were afraid of what she might know about them. She'd learned to keep her experiences with Rex's visions to herself, understanding that not everyone was ready to believe in the impossible. Thomas Garrett had made a full recovery and had become like a grandfather to Maya. He visited them regularly, always bringing treats for Rex and stories about his years as a lighthouse keeper. During one of his visits, he had made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I've decided to donate the lighthouse to the Coast Guard Foundation," Thomas had said, sitting in Maya's living room, with Rex curled up at his feet. "It will become a memorial for Benjamin Hayes and all the other brave men and women who've lost their lives protecting others." Maya had felt a warm glow in her chest when Thomas made his announcement. She knew, somehow, that Benjamin would have approved. The lighthouse that had been the center of so much tragedy would now be a symbol of hope and remembrance. The memorial dedication was scheduled for the anniversary of Benjamin's death, and Maya had been asked to speak at the ceremony. She was nervous about talking in front of so many people, but she knew she had to honor the man whose spirit had touched her life so profoundly. As autumn turned to winter, Maya began experiencing new dreams. But these weren't the intense, traumatic visions she'd shared with Rex during their investigation. These were gentle dreams, filled with warmth and light. In them, she would see Benjamin Hayes standing in a beautiful meadow, healthy and whole, with Rex running beside him as a puppy again. "Thank you," Benjamin would say in these dreams. "Thank you for helping us both find peace." Maya never told anyone about these dreams, but they filled her with a sense of completion and joy. She understood now that some connections transcend death, that love can bridge any gap, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen to the most ordinary people. Rex seemed to sense Maya's dreams too. On the nights when she dreamed of Benjamin, Rex would sleep more peacefully, sometimes even wagging his tail in his sleep, as if he was dreaming of better times. The day of the memorial dedication dawned clear and bright, despite it being late March and still chilly. Maya wore her best dress and carefully brushed Rex's coat until it shone. They made the drive to Beacon Point with Thomas, who had become an honorary uncle to Maya over the past months. When they arrived at the lighthouse, Maya was amazed by how many people had come. Coast Guard officers in full-dress uniforms stood alongside local officials, reporters, and dozens of people whose lives had been touched by Benjamin Hayes over the years. A bronze plaque had been installed at the base of the lighthouse, and American flags snapped in the ocean breeze. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell introduced Maya to the crowd, and she walked slowly to the podium with Rex by her side. Looking out at all the faces, Maya felt a moment of panic. How could she possibly explain what had happened without sounding crazy? Then she looked down at Rex, who gave her an encouraging tail wag, and she found her courage. "6 months ago, I found Rex in our mailbox," as Maya began, her voice small but clear. "He was hurt and scared, and I thought I was just saving a puppy. But Rex taught me that sometimes we don't save others. Sometimes they save us." Maya talked about the connection between Benjamin and Rex, about the power of love to transcend even death, and about the importance of never giving up on the people we care about. She spoke about how Benjamin's spirit had guided them to Thomas Garrett and helped them solve a mystery that had baffled adults. "Benjamin Hayes died protecting someone he cared about," Maya continued, gaining confidence with each word. "But his love didn't die with him. It lived on in Rex, and it brought us all together today. That's what heroes do. They leave behind love that keeps growing, even after they're gone." When Maya finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Even the tough Coast Guard officers were wiping away tears. Rex seemed to sense the emotional weight of the moment. He stood up and let out a single, clear bark that echoed across the water like a salute. After the ceremony, as people began to leave, Maya and Rex walked to the edge of the cliff overlooking the ocean. The lighthouse beam swept across the water in its eternal rhythm, and Maya felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. "Do you miss him?" Maya asked Rex quietly. Rex looked up at her, with eyes that were now completely free of the ancient sadness she'd first seen in them. He wagged his tail, and then did something he'd never done before. He placed his paw on Maya's hand, and gave her a gentle kiss on the cheek. Maya understood. Rex would always love Benjamin Hayes, but he wasn't trapped by grief anymore. He had found a new life, a new purpose, and a new family. The bond with Benjamin would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. As they walked back to Thomas's car, Maya noticed Rex pause and look back at the lighthouse one more time. For just a moment, Maya thought she saw a figure standing at the top of the tower, a man in a Coast Guard uniform, saluting. But when she blinked, there was nothing there, except the lighthouse beam cutting through the gathering dusk. That night, Maya had the most beautiful dream of her life. She was standing in that same peaceful meadow she'd seen before, but this time she wasn't alone. Benjamin Hayes was there, young and smiling, and beside him stood all the people whose lives he'd touched. Thomas Garrett, other Coast Guard officers, families he'd helped rescue over the years. "You did it," Benjamin said to Maya. "You helped Rex remember who he really is, not just my dog, but his own soul. You gave him the gift of a new beginning." "Will I see you again?" Maya asked. Benjamin smiled and knelt down as Rex ran up to him, tail wagging furiously. "Every time you look at Rex and see love instead of loss, you'll see me. Every time you help someone in need, you'll carry my spirit forward. And every time you refuse to give up on someone you care about, you'll honor everything I tried to stand for." Maya woke up the next morning, feeling lighter than she had in months. Rex was stretching beside her bed, ready for a new day full of normal dog activities: breakfast, walks, playing fetch, and napping in sunny spots. Over the following weeks, Maya began to notice that her connection with Rex had evolved. She no longer experienced the intense, overwhelming visions that had helped them solve Benjamin's case. Instead, she simply understood Rex better than most people understood their pets. She could tell when he was happy, sad, excited, or worried. She knew when he needed extra attention and when he wanted to be left alone to nap. But most importantly, Maya had learned to trust her intuition about people and situations. The experience with Rex had taught her that sometimes the most important truths aren't found in books or explained by adults. Sometimes they're found in the connections we make with others, both human and animal. 1 year after finding Rex in the mailbox, Maya received a letter that made her cry happy tears. It was from the Coast Guard Foundation, informing her that she and Rex had been selected to receive the Benjamin Hayes Memorial Award for civilian service. The award recognized their extraordinary contribution to solving a case that had baffled investigators and their role in saving Thomas Garrett's life. "Rex," Maya said, reading the letter aloud to her faithful companion, "we're going to Washington, D.C. to receive an award named after Benjamin." Rex wagged his tail and barked once, as if he understood the significance of what she'd just told him. Maya hugged him tightly, marveling at how far they'd both come since that rainy morning when she'd first heard scratching sounds coming from their mailbox. The award ceremony was beautiful, held in a grand hall filled with distinguished guests. Maya wore a new blue dress that matched Rex's ceremonial Coast Guard collar, a gift from Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. When their names were called, they walked together to the podium where a high-ranking Coast Guard admiral waited to present their award. "Maya Chen and Rex," the admiral announced to the crowd, "your courage, determination, and extraordinary partnership exemplify the highest ideals of service to others. The Benjamin Hayes Memorial Award recognizes not just your role in solving a difficult case, but your demonstration that heroism comes in all sizes and that the bonds of love are stronger than any obstacle." As Maya accepted the award, a beautiful crystal lighthouse that caught the light and threw rainbows around the room, she felt Benjamin's presence one final time, not as a desperate spirit seeking justice, but as a proud friend celebrating their success. That night, in their hotel room, Maya and Rex looked out at the lights of the nation's capital. Rex was wearing his award ribbon around his neck, and Maya had placed their crystal lighthouse on the windowsill where it could catch the morning sun. "We did it, Rex," Maya whispered. "We helped Benjamin find peace. We saved Thomas, and we brought a bad person to justice. But most of all, we found each other." Rex curled up beside her on the hotel bed, completely relaxed and content. He was no longer the traumatized puppy she'd found in a mailbox. He was her dog, her partner, her best friend. And Maya was no longer just an ordinary 6-year-old girl. She was someone who had learned that love transcends death, that courage comes in unexpected packages, and that sometimes the most important missions are accomplished by the smallest heroes. Years later, when Maya was grown up and had children of her own, she would tell them about the magical year when she and Rex had solved a mystery that changed their lives forever. Her children would listen with wide eyes, not sure whether to believe such an incredible story. But Rex, now an old dog with gray around his muzzle, would always be there as proof that sometimes the impossible becomes possible when love shows the way. And every year on the anniversary of Benjamin Hayes' death, Maya and Rex would return to Beacon Point Lighthouse to lay flowers at the memorial and watch the lighthouse beam sweep across the ocean, carrying with it the eternal message that some lights never go out, some love never dies, and some heroes never truly leave us. The story that had begun with a scratching sound in a mailbox had become a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of determination, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living beings in ways that science can't explain, but the heart always understands. Maya, Chen, and Rex had found each other in the most extraordinary circumstances, and together they had proved that even the smallest voices can make the biggest difference when they speak with love. What's the most extraordinary connection you've ever felt with an animal? Like this story, share it with someone who needs to believe in miracles, subscribe for more incredible true stories, and comment below with your own amazing animal encounters.